Thank you, Ruben. And well, knowing how hot our laptops can get every now and then, I truly hope you don't end up with any burn holes in your socks. And a good morning, of course, to everybody on the other side of the camera. That camera I see now. Good morning to everybody, or good afternoon, or wherever you are, good day. As every year, for me to update you again with what the technical team has been up to. Just to provide you with a small agenda, I'll be going over some of the more visible projects we have ongoing at the moment, and I will follow up with the expansions that Ruben also mentioned earlier on. But before we go there, let's start with an update of the platform. Some initial information for that. I'll be showing you some comparisons over the next couple of slides. And these comparisons are between the last 12 months since the More-IP, or since the last More-IP, or the webinar we did back then. And the 12 months prior to that. So let's get started with some of the numbers. Hong Kong, first on the list. We see a single port decrease for the 1 gigabit port, and we also see a single 100 gigabit port being connected. This resulted in a 22% increase, going from 444 gigabytes of total connected capacity up to 543 gigabytes. If we then look at the traffic volume going over the exchange, which is the volume passing the exchange every day, or in this case every year, we see an increase of 25%, going from 109 petabyte to 136 petabyte. We then continue with Curaçao, and in Curaçao it's a pretty stable exchange in amount of ports. Over the last 2 years we actually didn't see any increases or decreases. That's why there's a flat line until 2 months ago, when we had a single 1 gig port decrease. And this right away shows back in the graph. This resulted in the total connected capacity to go down with less than 1%, from 130 gigabit to 129 gigabit. The traffic volume, on the other hand, took a bit of an increase. And my letters are very small, so I cannot read the percentage, but it went up from 51 petabyte up to 59 petabyte. Continuing with Mumbai, and Mumbai has been live for a couple of years now and has been showing a really nice and steady growth over the years. And the same for this year again. We did see a decrease of 3 1 gigabit ports, but at the same time we also saw an increase of 10 times 10 gigabit. This resulted in an increase for the total connected capacity, going from 458 gigabits to 555 gigabit, which is 21%. If we look at the traffic volume, we saw an even better increase there of 53%, going from 96 petabytes to 147 petabyte. Next on the list, my clicker doesn't work. Yeah, there it is. Next on the list is the US, and then starting with the Bay Area. For the Bay Area, we saw a single 1 gigabit being increased or being connected, but we also saw 6 10 gigabit ports being disconnected. This resulted in a decrease of 10% for the total connected capacity, going from 597 gigabits to 538. We saw a similar decrease of 10% for the traffic volume passing the exchange, going from 60 petabyte to 54 petabyte last year. Staying in the US, but continuing with Chicago, we saw sort of similar numbers, with 8 times 10 gigabit ports being disconnected, which resulted in an 8% decrease on the total connected capacity, going from just over 1 terabit to 931 gigabits. Traffic volume, on the other hand, did see a slight increase of 3%, going from 248 petabyte to 255. Last on the list for the remote exchanges is the AMS-IX, which was introduced somewhere mid-2019, and it has been showing some really nice growth ever since the introduction. Especially after COVID hit, it had some explosive growth. For the last 12 months, it has added 24 ports in total over the different port speeds. And because of that, we saw the total connected capacity increase with over 200%, going from 280 gigabits to 853 gigabits. On the graph on the right side, you can see a little bit of a flat line for the last couple of months. And this is because we are in process of adding an additional switch to cope with the explosive growth. Which has been installed now and ready to go. So I do expect more customers to be connected in the next couple of days, actually. What I cannot show you is the traffic volumes for the AMS-IX, and that is because the current IX as a service software stack does not support the data collection for that yet. I do hope to be able to show you those next year. That was it for the remote exchanges. If we then move to Amsterdam, the biggest exchange, of course. we do see a decrease in the total connected ports, mainly caused by the 8 times 1 gigabit ports that decreased. And of course, also the 10 gigabit ports, which clearly are not a hype anymore, decreasing with 107 ports. On the other hand, for the 10 gigabits, we know that most of them are actually an effect from the upgrades that we have seen during the COVID time to 100 gigabits, and that resulted in 72 additional 100 gigabit ports. The effect on the total connected capacity was an increase going from 38.7 terabyte to 44.8 terabit. Next on the list is then the traffic volume for Amsterdam. A minor correction from my side, I added the averages per month to the slide. Please ignore that line. It was copied from a different slide and I forgot to update the numbers, so they're incorrect. But if we look at the yearly numbers, the ones that I did update, we see a really nice increase of 34%, going from 18.1 exabyte to 24.3 exabyte. And to cope with all these increases, of course, the backbones need to be increased as well, and quite drastically. The total connected capacity for the backbones in Amsterdam went up from 31.2 terabit to 39.4 terabit. And as you can see on the graph on the left bottom, most of these backbones were built in the last 7 months. And I will come back to those, explosive numbers in a bit. A little bit of history. 19 years ago, we started keeping track of the traffic volume for Amsterdam. And back then, in 2002, we did about 2.2 petabytes per month of traffic passing the exchange. If we then fast forward to 19 years later to now, we see 1,000 times more traffic of 2.2 exabyte passing the exchange. So quite an increase. And then last but not least for the Amsterdam numbers, we of course hit the milestone of 10 terabits last month, early April. And I was planning on adding the different dates for all the different terabit speed records that we made. But while actually reading up on tweakers.net, one of the websites here, about the comments on this milestone, I found that somebody did my homework for me, and he posted, or she posted, the dates for me. So thank you for that, Christox. Good thing to notice here is, or a good thing to see here is that actually the increases from 6 terabits to 7, 8, 9, and now 10 were done in just over 2 years. The same can be said from 5 to 6. That single terabit was done in the same amount of time of 2 years. So for the last 2 years, we have been growing 4 times faster than before. And that was it for the numbers for the platform update. Kostas will be showing you some more numbers from the operational side of things later on. But for me, it's now to continue with the projects that we have ongoing. Like every year, I pick out a couple of projects, some of the nicer projects, to present to you, and this year is pretty much the same. And usually I choose something that is a bit more cutting edge or a new way of doing things. But this year I chose a little bit different. It's because these are projects that we already announced a while back but got delayed, but also because they will have a large effect on the platform that you connect to. Also the first project, it's one of those projects, which is the switching or the migration to a new switching vendor. The RFP for that. This project is taking longer than we initially anticipated or we initially planned for, but with some very good reasons. First of all, up to now, we always did RFPs or proof of concepts, basically with the same vendor as we already had installed. And because of this, we didn't need to change a lot of things. Some comments and syntaxes changed, of course, and the hardware did change a little bit. But things like the support contracts or the contact people and process, they were already in place, and therefore not many changes were needed. But now we're actually changing or planning on changing the vendor. All those things do change, and that takes longer than we initially planned for. On top of that, I already presented the amount of backbones we had to implement and the amount of customer ports we implemented more than the previous years before. And that took away some resources as well, causing some additional delay as well. Also another thing that caused some extra delay was that in the second half of last year, we thought of this new plan of doing the proof of concept, which should have speeded things up a little, but instead it backfired and caused some additional delay. Nonetheless, we are back on track now. And at this moment, we basically narrowed our search down to 2 remaining vendors. The first vendor has been tested already on the technical side of things, so the proof of concept has been finalized, and the commercial side has also just been finalized. The second vendor we have chosen to test with, we are currently testing. 2 of our engineers are currently in Belgium doing those tests. And at the same time, the commercial side is also progressing nicely. Looking at the current timelines with the proposal to the board and the MT and everything, we expect to make a decision within the next 2 to 2.5 months. And of course, after that, we can start the planning of the next switch migrations. More on that will follow shortly once we know more. Another project that we announced a little while ago was that we would be moving our core node from EU Networks data center to the Digital Realty data tower at Science Park. And just like the switching vendor, this project got also delayed due to the explosive expansions in the backbone and the customer ports during the COVID lockdowns. Another reason for this one to be actually postponed a little bit was that we had a curfew installed, and of course these projects will happen during the night, making traveling a lot harder with curfews in place. And also some of the data centers imposed some measures limiting the amount of personnel in the data center at the same time. And our core switches are quite huge and quite heavy, and we do have very strong engineers, but still we need multiple people to lift those things in the rack and cable them up. The plan that we had for the core move was actually quite simple. We would build up a new core already, pre-configure a new core at the Digital Realty data tower and connect it with some spare DCI equipment that we had to the EU Networks core node. After we have done that, we were able to move the POP locations one at a time so they could still communicate to EU Networks and the other POP locations through this backbone link. But to repeat some of the words that I actually said during my first More-IP presentation back in 2017, plans are there to be broken. And this one, it was the same. It also got broken. Like I said, we were building massive amounts of backbones. And for these backbones, we needed DCI equipment. We did have on spare, and we had some even reserves for this project. But the amount of backbones we were building quickly took away all of the spares and the reserves. So we started ordering new ones with our vendor, and we already knew that the end of sale for the equipment we used was coming near. But what we didn't know was that it was actually pushed forward. So when we did the last order we heard that that would actually be the last order available. Because of that, we were unable to create the link between the two core nodes, and therefore we had to come up with a lot of new plans. Can you slide my notes a little bit down, please? I lost my story a bit. Thank you. So we saw our stock shrink to a moment where we couldn't install the link anymore. So we thought of many different approaches, but many of them, or all of them, didn't have the redundancy in place that we were hoping for. And because of that, we would do this migration with lower redundancy for longer periods of time. And those are two things we don't like: lower redundancy, and especially for longer periods of time. So in the end, we found a different plan where we would actually extend the project over several weeks, maybe even months. But the disadvantage for that was that our engineers would work nearly every night for a long period of time, and we are not set up for those kind of situations. But just as we were planning on actually executing the plan like that, two of our partners came to the rescue, and these two partners were Nokia and Tallgrass. So obviously we've been in talks with Nokia already in the past for different subjects, for their switching platform, for the DCI solutions, and we're also in talks with them for one of the innovation projects that Elena yesterday presented and Ruben mentioned this morning. And maybe a bit less known, we have also been in talks with Tallgrass already for many years, mainly because they have this really nice outsider view of our network, and they can come up every now and then with these out-of-the-box ideas. And on top of that, they also provide really good up-to-date knowledge for our engineers. These two, when Nokia and Tallgrass heard about the issue we were facing, they actually came together and they created a plan. Nokia to arrange the equipment needed to create a 4 terabit link between the two core nodes, and Tallgrass to install it and provision it and even support it during the project. And they did this within like 2 or 3 days after hearing about the issue. It went really fast. And I know this sounds a bit maybe like a commercial twist to my technical update, but I think this is the least that I can do for them after what they have done for us, to show you what partners we have in place when we need them the most, and what they're willing to do for us when we need them the most. So going back to the project, so at this very moment, I just received word that Tallgrass and Nokia installed and tested and delivered this link, and it's up and running. Our engineers are doing some final pre-flight checks, and we're pretty much ready to go, I believe, in 2 weeks from now. And at first I wasn't planning on providing too much detail on this project because I promised marketing to create a blog about this or a story about this for on the website and for on our social media. But it is More-IP, and I don't want to send you home, or well, you're already home, but I don't want to send you away empty-handed. So let me give you a slight snapshot of what we're planning on doing. So the current state, or the initial state that we were in, you can see on the screen, which is a very simplified part of our network. On the left side of the diagram, you can see the EU Networks core node, and on the right side, you can see 2 POP locations. And of course, these are connected through the DCI network in between. What you don't see on the screen, though, is that we also have a global switch core node, which functions as the backup in case of issues. And also, no, that's it. The first step actually to take is the preparational step, building up the core node at Digital Realty and doing some pre-configurations there, and install some initial DCI to take as a preparation to take over the first POP node. And of course, you can also see the big black line between the EU Networks and the Digital Realty data centers, which is the link provided by Nokia and Tallgrass. What you don't see is the new backbones that have been installed between the POP locations and the DRT core node. But they are there, I can promise you that. This is basically the state we are in now, and like I said, we're doing some final pre-flight checks, but we are sort of ready to go. Once we go, the next step would simply be to take the old dark fiber going to the EU Networks data center from the POP location and disconnect it, and then connect the new fiber to go to DRT. We'll make sure that the link is coming up. NOC will do their, or network engineers will do their magic, and they will make sure that the POP location can communicate with all the other POP locations through DRT, through the link to EU Networks, and from there to the rest of the network. And of course, if something goes wrong, like I said, we do have the global switch core node as well as a failover. Once this is done, the next step would be to move the DCI, and my clicker doesn't, oh yeah, it is, sorry. To move the DCI that was now disconnected to EU Networks, we can now move it to the DRT location and prepare it again for the next POP location. We then basically, we repeat steps 2 and 3 until we migrated all 14 POP locations. And from there on out, we end up with a network looking like this. Again, very simplified and only a part of the network. So the migrations of the dark fiber will be done during the night, of course, because traffic amounts are low at that moment. So if there's an issue, we can easily mitigate it. And the move of the DCI themselves, the hardware, will be done during the day because then it's easier access to the data centers. And in case of need for spare, we can easier get to our storage locations. And again, this is, of course, a very simplified version still. And if you do want more details, please do be on the lookout. I think somewhere in July or August, we will be showing you a blog or maybe even a vlog if we feel like it, with way more details on this project. So another project that we have already announced was the data center interconnect and DCI, or the DCI implementations. It's a subject that I have been talking about every single presentation I've done since I work for AMS-IX. And basically, you might remember that we started the implementation back in October of 2016, and we finalized it in August of 2018. On the screen, you can see the advantages that came out of it again, like the massive reduction in dark fibers and cross connects, while we increased the amount of backbone links going over those dark fibers. And now I lost my story a little bit. I'm sorry. Can we scroll the notes a bit, please? Thank you. Yeah, so a while back, sorry for that. A while back ago, I announced that we would be looking into a new DCI vendor. But with all that has been going on, we had to put the project on hold because we needed to put our priorities on different projects. So before we put it on hold, though, we did test the first vendor already to see what their equipment would be capable of. And we also had extensive talks with several other vendors. On top of that, we also introduced Tallgrass into the mix to share their knowledge and experiences. And once the core move is over, we have agreed to keep the Nokia equipment that has been installed for the core move a little bit longer, so we can do some initial testing there too. But if there's one thing we have learned from the projects that we're currently running, mainly the switch of the vendor, switching vendor, but also of the core move, there are other options out there. And the other options I'm talking about is, of course, the 400 gig. And it has been mentioned in different presentations yesterday, and it will be mentioned again in different presentations today as well. But yeah, we have been looking into it. We've been seeing an increased amount of requests from customers now. So so we do really want to start supporting it soon. In fact, recently I was talking with one of our members, and they requested to do a pilot with them for 400 gigabit. And instead of looking into that, I sort of suggested a minor challenge, which is to not just do the pilot with this one member, but also to actually introduce 400 gigabit and offer it to our customers and members before the end of the year. And then that made me think a little bit that if we are to introduce or offer 400 gigabit for customers, it is more than a logical choice to also introduce 400 gigabit into our backbone network. And with the current technology and the amounts we need, I don't see a very logic choice of aggregating the 400 gigabit over DCI. Instead, I would go for the point-to-point connections, eliminating an active equipment in between. But of course, before we go there, we do still have a lot of choices to make and a lot of homework to do. But it is good for you to know that we are busy with it, and we are going to challenge ourselves, or at least I'm going to challenge myself, to get us up and running and get you the 400 gigabit offered as soon as possible. For now, though, we're going to keep going on with the DCI proof of concept and the RFP, because we do need a new vendor for the DCI that we have in place. Not everywhere will we introduce 400 gigabit, of course. So we will be looking into which vendor we will be using to supplement or to replace the existing equipment with. And of course, we're hoping for a higher density and more power efficient, just to make us a little bit more green. That was it for those projects. Last but not least on my agenda, we have several implementations going on for IX as a service. Already mentioned yesterday, and I believe it's also in the annual report. We are expanding a total of 4 extra exchanges in India. And on top of that, we also have an IX as a service for Uzbekistan and one in Egypt going on. And of course, Manama is being expanded. It's a very nice product, so if you feel like starting an IX, please do call out to us, and we'll help you from there and get you in touch with the right people. But I also have a little scoop, because we're not only expanding with IX as a service, we're actually going to expand our Netherlands-based network. And we're going to do this together with 2 new partners, SmartDC and Greenhouse. Both of these partners are located in the beautiful Dutch province of South Holland, and you guessed it, it's a bit south of here. SmartDC is located in Rotterdam, and Greenhouse is a little bit more to the west in Naaldwijk. We plan to deliver both of these data centers or POP locations at the same time, and it will be somewhere in this summer, if we look at the current timelines and the workload. For more information, please do be on the lookout for the official press release. It hasn't been released yet because, well, even though we agreed everything and all the paperwork is there, we do need some final signatures and you name it to make it official. But the press release will be released most likely somewhere end of next month. And that was it for me. I can't keep on talking, but Kostas kind of begged me not to take all the projects away from him, so I will leave a couple for him to talk about. But yeah, that's it. Any questions? Ruben, I'll go to you.
Well, thank you very much, Tim. And I will be very sure to challenge you in thinking up of all these great solutions that you just talked about.